Hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. How's your Saturday going, Brooke?
Going pretty well. I've just been talking with my family about the
hmm
world.
hmm And you're in Asheville, North Carolina, right?
I am. Yes.
Okay, which is probably one of my favorite cities in the
Oh,
world.
really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I actually have thought about moving there several times,
Yeah,
or to the area. I have very good friends who live just north of there in Burnsville
that's
in
right. Yeah.
Yancey County.
Yeah.
And so I visit that area like once or twice a year, you know.
Well, we have to have
Um,
coffee next time you do.
yes. So I am very excited to talk to you because I've been following you. We've been following each other on Facebook for some time. I don't even remember how we got
2010.
connected. Oh,
Yeah,
2010.
a
Okay.
long time ago
So,
when the tea party
yeah.
and the coffee party started.
Okay. So that's how we connected. Okay.
A friend
Well,
of mine
great.
named Jim Infantino sent me
Mhm.
the link to your page because he liked it, and I don't know who he got it from. But that was way back when the Tea Party was causing so much trouble. And
Right. Now we just have a different version of the Tea Party. We call them Trump
mhm,
supporters.
right, right,
But it's pretty much the same people.
right.
Um, but I would love to talk to you today about like what's on your mind right now,
Mhm.
after the primary, before this general election that many of us are very nervous about,
Yes.
excited about, obsessed with.
Hmm.
And I know that you and I both supported Warren.
Hmm.
I'm very
Yes.
passionate about our support for Warren.
Yes.
Um, and I'm just would love to check in with you about how you're feeling
Hmm.
about, Joe Biden and this election coming up, and how you feel about just how everything went down.
Right.
And yeah, so
I almost have to separate how I feel about how it went down and how I feel about it now. I had a lot of feelings about the blatant misogyny that I feel I witnessed in the primary, as well as racism overall. On the other hand, I was very excited to see the field of people that were there. I felt that, most people who were running and a lot of, just Harris, Booker, um, Castro, Warren, of course, but so many other people too. There were so many I could have thrown my support behind. So it was exciting to me to see a depth and a quality in the Democratic Party, which I think speaks well of our party as compared, for example, to the Republicans. When people want to say it's all the same, just look at that field and the other field and look at the kind of the thoughtfulness and the commitment um, that's going on there. So I was unhappy that my country wasn't ready for a President Warren.
mhm,
But I pretty quickly, as I saw the primaries move on, and I think I took my lead from Warren too, who's not someone to. I think that's one of the things that was special about her. She's not someone to say like, well, this isn't going the way I wanted, so people must be stupid. You know, that's really important to me. That isn't. I thought, wow, this isn't going. I really thought that she was the right leader, and I thought other people would agree with me.
mhm,
But when they didn't, I didn't get the feeling that something's going wrong or people are stupid. Or I got curious about, so because it didn't seem corrupt to me. I really do think there's a lot of corruption right now, but I don't think it's all happening in the DNC. And I don't agree with that, broad stroke that some on the left are painting of the DNC as just all politics as usual.
mhm.
Felt like I was hearing from, I did feel like I felt like watching those debates, it was crazy, it was messy, it was weird, it was not what I was used to, but it was exciting to me because it felt very democratic. And I ultimately felt like, look, people have decided that for whatever reason, and there are many reasons, this guy is sort of representing, like they want all these different people, but they think this guy would be the better person to sort of push forward to represent the entire party. And I don't know in the past, in all the elections I've been through, if I felt that. I felt like it was more like, who's the man or who's the woman? Who's our leader? This feels like a different time. This feels very collective to me. Like it does, Joe Biden doesn't matter. He's just some white guy in a suit, I mean, but it's his policies, it's what he's going to do, who he's going to listen to. Because, as Noam Chomsky has pointed out, this platform that he's running on is the farthest left that we've had as far as social safety net goes since FDR. And I think it's exciting that he's not a star, because we've had a lot of stars. And I just don't feel like it's always gotten us where we feel we need to go. And what I'm seeing now is a collectivism coming in. I don't know why it has to be a white man. Honestly, it kind of annoys me. But there it is. Like the people, that's what they're saying they need right now. They almost need, I don't know, maybe they need a white guy to atone for what's happened. Or I don't know. I honestly don't. I feel like I'm still open. I'm curious. I'm learning. But I don't have that sinking feeling that I think people are worried about, that, oh, it's just more of the same. I don't think anything is more of the same right now. I think the world is at a pivotal moment. I was in Berlin. I think, as you know, you probably see me post a million times at Checkpoint Charlie when the wall fell. I lived there for 10 years. And I remember the time leading up to that moment. Tiananmen Square was happening. I believe that I'm living in such times again. Absolutely. And so it's hard for me to say what I'm happy to not project what I think, that I'm happy to not obsess about a leader right now, and instead to obsess about what we can do together and the policies that we need to enact for the majority of people in this country, and to stop, because over there in Trumplandia, they're obsessing about a leader. So in a way, I'm glad that isn't what we got, that we didn't get someone that everyone was obsessed with this person,
Interesting. I guess I have made peace with what happened in the primary myself, and it did have to do with seeing how many Republican friends were supporting Biden, and that they told me straight up that if it had been Warren, they just wouldn't have known what to do, because they don't support her, because they don't think she is establishment enough, and that she's too radical, that she is socialist. And they're very happy with Joe Biden, and they feel really good about supporting him. So all this momentum coming out of things like, Republicans against Trump and Lincoln Project, I don't know if that energy would be there if it had not been Biden, but somebody a lot more progressive, or really anybody else. But they know Biden, because they've been in there. A lot of them are like Washington political types who organized this effort, the Lincoln Project. They know him and they trust him, and so that's when I started to feel better about it. Like, oh, okay, so to be able to work with some moderate Republicans to kind of do a major course correction, I think is absolutely needed right now. And so I have made peace with it. I still would like to see Warren become his running mate. I'm still holding out hope that he chooses her as a running mate. But so far, I've never been that excited about Joe Biden, but I do feel like in terms of pure political calculus, like he's what we need in order to beat Trump.
See, that's so interesting, because you and I could not have more literally opposite reasons for wanting him, and yet it's almost like he is this weird Zelig-like character that is able to fill in, you know what I mean, to fill in a place marker for people who are in the hurricane or the tornado of this moment, which is, this is a historical moment. I mean, I truly believe that history books will be written about this year, So that's so interesting that, for me, I'm just like, I don't care about those moderate Republicans, but that's not completely true, because I do believe that there was a time when I don't know if you've been following Heather Cox Richardson. You know, I love, and I watch her lectures, and you know, the whole idea that she's hearkening back to a time where the liberal consensus was bipartisan. You know, that the idea of humanity, literally of human dignity, wasn't kind of on the chopping block. You know, it wasn't that the Republican Party was not based in an, I mean, I don't know, authoritarian, unequal, elitist impulse, which it has been since William F. Buckley, basically, and the Taft Republicans and everything she talks about. I didn't really, you know, I grew up after that. That happened right before I was born. I was born in 1965. So all of this shift, the movement conservatives were born before I was. So all my life, I've despaired of moderates, really. And yet in my own family, I will admit that, you know, even though I have basically people in my family that would either vote Republican or not vote. I mean, they're not going to vote Democrat, but they're not voting. I mean, they won't vote for him, you know, which is good. I don't know. So, you know, I know that you've been working on this bipartisanship that in a way I never really understood. And Heather Cox Richardson has helped me, I think, see where you're coming from more, because she explains to us that there was a time when real bipartisanship actually existed, and that it encompassed the idea of equal rights, human dignity, and democracy, rather than anti. I mean, right now, the Republican Party is not democratic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the way I see it, I think most progressives see bipartisanship as just Democrats caving into Republicans.
Yeah.
And that's not bipartisanship.
Right.
And I think that you know, Democrats have always kind of perceived that in terms of just pure negotiation, we're always coming from a weaker place, because one, we just don't play hardball in that way, you know, and two, that, you know, just historically, it's really never been helpful to us. But actually, I think that is a false reading. I mean, just about every major legislation that we've had did require some form of bipartisanship, you know.
Yes,
and
true.
and what's killing us at this moment has a lot to do with the extreme polarization that is a byproduct of our media dynamics, you know. So it's not just like where people are in terms of the political spectrum, but how Facebook algorithm works, you know, and how Twitter works. And so we've created these echo chambers where more conflict creates more algorithm and more views, and so people are gravitating towards those things. And so I feel like it's kind of inflated the differences, and it kind of obscured what we do have in common, you know, but when you actually sit down with a lot of, you know, Republicans or conservatives, libertarians, I almost always find things in common with them.
Yes. I see the same thing. I just see it from, I'm looking at it, rather, I'm choosing to see it from a different, I'm not seeing it from a point of view of feeling like the media has created this by its algorithm.
No, that's not, but I don't mean that the media has some intention to create it. It just kind of what is a function of how things developed.
Yes, but I just don't believe that it actually comes from the way the media operates. I believe it comes from how fascism operates. So I believe that when I look at America and Europe in the entire 20th century until now, there's a continuum of fascism that we're always moving along. And the polarization is an aspect of creeping fascism, and which is not what I used to think. I used to really, and that's why it was difficult, because I really felt like I've got to find a way to. The problem is that, like you mentioned, the loudest voices or the most promoted voices. it's not that they're the most extreme. Like, it's not that they're the most extreme from the left to the right. This is what I think is really important for me to understand right now. It's not the polarization of, like, say, socialism versus hypercapitalism. It's democracy and anti-democracy. It's anti-fascism and fascism. And then left and right is a continuum that happens in that whole spectrum. I think we have read it wrong in looking at socialism as being some or social safety nets and social progressive democratic politics as being some radical left-wing idea. I think that has only happened because we have been moving towards fascism ever since the 60s, slowly but surely. And as a matter of fact, what I expect to happen, which I hope never happens, but what I would expect if we would move completely into fascism, would actually be for those people that we say are more on the left, to begin to find common cause with fascists on the right. That is what I have been obsessed with over the last year and looking at, and that is why that's why I moved my support away from Bernie, I'm sorry to say, only because I don't have anything against him personally, but moving away from things like the support for Joe Rogan, things that are real red flags when it comes to fascism. When you see people giving up on equality or giving up on human rights for economic rights, that's a red flag. That's not truly leftist. That's not Enlightenment principles. That's not equality. So I don't think it's just the media that's presenting it that way. I think there's an actual dynamic happening where we started to shift the center to the right decades ago. And this polarization is the result of that. It is not the result of everyone going farther into their bubbles. I just have to say, I don't believe that. I thought that, but I don't think it anymore. I think it is the result of the movement of the center to the right. And if the center moves back to the left or towards the left or more left, there will not be the same polarization. It is the nature of the center moving towards the right to create fascism, which is polarized.
Yeah.
And I think the other way around, it doesn't happen.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't disagree with you. I do feel like the center has moved to the right, and that's caused a lot of problems. So I definitely agree with you on that. I think that what you mean by polarization and what I mean by polarization might be a little bit different, because I don't mean like necessarily there's a linear political spectrum with socialism and communism on one side and market fundamentalist capitalism on the other side. That those are the two poles. I think there are other poles, right? And so one of the poles, for instance, to me, has to do with tactics and the use of violence, right? So if you're on wherever you are on the political spectrum, if you're willing to use violence, justify violence, right?
What do you mean by violence?
Violence meaning, people who show up in Michigan with assault rifles to occupy the state capitol. People who are willing to burn down storefronts in their communities, or people who infiltrate protests to do that kind of provocation, the agent provocateurs that infiltrate these protests. And so like if you're willing to use violence, like to me, like that's an extreme tactic. So that's a pole. So I just feel there are multiple poles. Like instead of seeing it as like a linear spectrum, I think we can see different dimensions, that it's just more of like a round globe, of different poles coming from different directions. And so I personally feel like, we need to stay nonviolent. Our tactics need to be nonviolent, and to hang on to, the moral center, to make sure that like we are on the moral side of things, and that this is a way to attract more people to us, because we can get a lot of people who really are averse to violence and unrest and you know, just the degradation of civil society. You know, I think we can attract those people to our side if we commit to being nonviolent and being very disciplined when we go about trying to make change. Like that's you know, my opinion, and I think that's something that we saw in the civil rights movement, is how Dr. King again and again and again affirmed this idea of coming from a place of love, organizing with love, loving our enemy, and to being committed to nonviolent action. You know, there's a whole tradition of that, and I think that to me is like really important. And so it's not so much that I disagree with some of the so-called policies or politics, like an eventual outcome, right? Because I consider myself a socialist.
Right.
So it's not so much that I disagree with the outcome that people want, but I often find myself disagreeing with the tactics people are taking.
Right.
Yeah.
And I personally, I don't see these tactics. See, when I look at violence in our society, and when I look at breakdown of civil society, and when I look at people terrorizing other people, I don't see it happening from people that are fighting for equal rights. I see that happening from a police state. I see that happening from militias on the, I mean, I really do see at this moment.
But let's say it's happening though, Brooke. Let's say you do start seeing it and you find out it is happening. What would be your response?
What is happening that I'm seeing? People are planning it. Like, for instance, when I lived in Berlin, the RAF and their attendant terrorist organizations were still operating, and I opposed them 100%. The Black Autonomen Bloc, which was bent on property destruction to disrupt what they called fascism, which was any sort of state at all, I was against. But that is not what I see happening in America now. What I see is a fascist police state. You know, like people in Berlin used to say it's the fascist police state, and I was saying no, it's not. Look around you. I mean, there were tactics of the police that were not good then. So, for example, I vocally oppose the RAF, but I do not oppose Antifa, because I see Antifa as a completely separate thing from the RAF and the Autonomen, and a lot of people conflate them as being the same thing, but they're not. But, you know, a lot of people will say that stopping traffic on a bridge is violence, or shutting down fascist speaking is violence. I disagree with that. So that's what I would do. But if people were planning assassinations, if people were going to, when people joke on Facebook about things like bring out the guillotines, I always say stop, because that, like in other words, I'm not a fan of the French Revolution and the way that went down at all. So if I saw that, I would say something about that. But I see a lot of concern about that where I don't see it happening, and I see people saying it's happening when it's not happening. You know?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have to litigate that right now. I just mean that for me,
I would stand against it.
Yes. Yeah, for me, it's like very important that we remain nonviolent and commit to nonviolence. That's where I'm coming from.
Nonviolence, but I commit to resistance. So for example, would I blow up a munitions dump that some militia people had that they were about to use to hurt someone when no one's there? Yes, that's property destruction. That's not violence. I would resist fascism, but I would not plan to. I don't want to. I was the one who didn't want Osama bin Laden killed. Do you know what I mean? I was horrified at that strike. It was an assassination. It's an extrajudicial killing. I'm against the death penalty in every case, no matter what. I don't care who it is, Jeffrey Dahmer, anyone. So yes, ultimately nonviolent. I just don't consider property the same as life. I differentiate between them. To disrupt an action through property destruction, I could consider. So that's my thing, you know.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, again, I see a difference in terms of, you know, the difference between assassination or bombing
Yeah.
versus property destruction. At the same time, you know, if you know the people whose lives have been disrupted, whose
Yeah.
businesses had to close
Mm.
because of that property destruction.
Oh yeah, I don't think we should attack businesses. Those aren't, you know what I
Mm,
mean? It's anti-fascist in the sense of if something is fascist and is operating to
right.
disseminate fascism in the country now, to stop it.
Right. But you know that there was property destruction during the protests, right?
Yes, and but
Yeah.
it's coming out now that it's not. I'm just saying it was assumed that that is done by people who are, for example, supporting Black Lives Matter, but that's not
Yeah.
100% clear. There's a lot that went on. I mean, like the umbrella guy. Now, a lot of reports are coming out about right wing. Even the FBI is admitting that like much of the destruction that happened was from right
Yeah.
wing agitators. And to me, to compare that to first of all,
Hmm.
it wasn't necessarily. So I'm just saying I don't think that that should happen. Um, but I'm not sure that it did happen. And if it does happen, I think that it's not a good tactic. I agree that that is not a tactic that should be
Hmm.
used to
Hmm.
achieve the means.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so almost
I
at
don't
every,
judge it as harshly as I judge people
right.
burning effigies of a governor and coming with AR-14s and shutting down and
Right.
threatening
Okay.
lawmakers. I judge that more harshly.
Okay. I mean, we can move on. I
Yeah.
just wanted to clarify,
Yes.
you know,
So
that
that's the polarization for you. Yeah.
yeah, so that it's not just about the left versus right in terms of policies, but there are also differences in tactics, for instance, and other polarities,
Right.
you know, that we could discuss. But, you know, I think that the reason why the media does play a role in the polarization has to do with how conflict drives eyeballs and traffic and interest, and that resolution, which is what I would like to see,
Mm,
isn't of interest. It doesn't become news when you have people really seeking resolution.
right.
You know, it's only when there's conflict, when it's immediately all over Twitter and in the media. So in any case, um, as somebody who is interested in resolution,
Yes.
let's go back to Biden for a second.
Mhm.
Okay, so tell me more about kind of how you started to move from accepting that Warren lost and feeling aggrieved, because I definitely spent a good 2 weeks like
Yeah.
grieving, and and maybe I'm still grieving, but and where you are at this moment and what you're interested in doing to make sure that we win this election. So tell me
Right.
about that journey.
Yes. What I'm just to go straight to the action part, what I'm interested in doing is I really feel like I'm behind on that. You know, I think I got completely thrown off my guard by this whole pandemic, like many people, and I've been struggling with like minor depression and just like really, and also the loss, you know, but I think it came right together. It was like there was that loss, and then boom, there was, you know, and I have two kids who are high schoolers who had plans and things got changed and we had to figure out with school and stuff.
Hmm.
But so how I got over it though was I think for me, it to a large extent, it had to do with the work one of the great things about supporting Warren that happened for me was that I was working in a group where I became a moderator, in a group where I was asked to be a moderator that was centering marginalized voices. And I'm just an absolute newbie and totally ignorant about any kind of social justice work. I always wanted to believe in it and everything, but I had been busy doing stuff and I hadn't really educated myself. So suddenly I was in with this new language and everything, understanding like how simple it is just to make sure that that I and other, you know, white people in the group and or whatever kind of privilege we have are not talking over marginalized people or not
Hmm.
particularly. So a lot of stuff would come up where like people would say like, well, Biden's also a good choice. And showing too that a lot of polls said that a lot of African Americans were voting for Biden or wanted to vote for Biden, and it would just be, it gets shot down in the group like, well, they don't know what's good for them, or so that really made me, shocked me, and I started stopping, and I stopped obsessing about my own desires and needs at the moment, and started thinking like, well, why are they, why don't they trust, Liz, the way they trust this Biden guy? And who am I to say that's not important, and also like that if a block of voters like that can basically like fuel the primary in that way, they're really passionate, they're showing up, they're doing what needs to be done. Why aren't I just automatically listening to what that message is saying to me, and I would, and so we would, and there was literally things I had to do in the group to moderate people not becoming disparaging, and doing all kinds of things because of that. So just that posture alone of like waiting, centering, listening to people, I began to hear a lot of things that surprised me. A lot of very, very progressive people that were like, I'm not okay with him, or I am okay with him, coming from like either the African American community, Black community, BIPOC communities. And I was like, wow, I wasn't really putting these voices to the forefront in the past, when I was, I was talking to a lot of women like me who were not, wealthy, but were sort of middle class, already not soccer moms, but almost like, I don't know, Gen X moms kind of thing. And they volunteer, they vote. And I was in my bubble in that way, speaking of bubbles and resolutions. So I just began to, I think I have to say, being in the role of a moderator in that position really helped me. So taking action by getting involved enough in a group to actually spend hours, an hour a day, helping to moderate conflict and make sure that everyone had a fair chance to be heard in a way that was respectful, really changed my view of the primary and the view of my own personal loss. So I guess that's how I got over it, I would say. I just felt like I need to be bigger because I'd been practicing. So it's good practice. Just being in a social justice group and having to constantly apologize, do better, and just get over my own BS. It really helped me.
Yeah, I mean, you did organizing work. I mean, that's like what you need to do to organize and build coalitions, is do what you just described.
Yeah.
I mean, I just want to add this interesting thing about Joe Biden to me is I was so worried about all the smears that would come his way, and the gaffes that he makes, and all the kind of problems with Joe Biden. And then as time went on, I just realized he's a bit of a Teflon Joe, in that like nothing really sticks. These smears, these criticisms, these gaffes, like none of them really seem to matter, because there's fundamentally a trust in his decency, and that he's somebody who would actually care and listen. He may not agree with you, but he will listen to you. And so there are very few public figures who can elicit that kind of trust from the public. And he's one of these people. And that just wasn't true with any of the other candidates, including Warren. And it's sad to me that Warren couldn't establish that with voters, but just what happened. I think that once they get to know her, that they would. But anyway, the point is that the man has served his time in public office for many years. They've seen him go through many hurdles. They've seen him serve in the White House under Obama for 8 years, and they trust the guy. And I'm like, actually, come to think of it, I trust him too. I mean, I think he's basically a decent person. He's not everything I want, but I'm not marrying the guy. He's somebody we need for this transition period. And so, I guess I've kind of arrived at the same point.
I think it may actually be important, like I was saying before, that Warren to me is an exception. She's she's brilliant. And I want to see that excellence and that brilliance, and you know, and Bernie is a firebrand leader and all of this. But in the face of Trump, that's like, why isn't this sticking? Because what Joe Biden at this moment in time, this is what I've been learning lately, is that you can't separate the choices and the movement and the tactics and the organizing from the moment. This moment, it's so weird that he actually got picked before COVID, because even now with COVID, even more, this moment is perfect for him, because he was never going to go out there and excite a bunch of people on stage. You know what I mean? No, that's not what it was about. It was about coalition building. It was about, he's the anti-Trump in every way. He's not interesting. He doesn't shock you. He listens. He makes mistakes. We know all about them. There's not a whole lot that's hidden. You know what I mean? And he apologizes. And that's why I personally, I'm, you said I get to say it because you said you were rooting for Warren. I'm rooting for Harris. I want Warren as Secretary of the Treasury, and I want Harris as the Vice President, because I just feel like if he keels over 2 minutes into the whatever, she's right there. Like, I just feel like she's tough. And I know that that's not necessarily what I would have wanted for all of my policy choices. But I like her. I like the fact that she is, and I also like the fact that those two were like mortal enemies on stage. And it's like, if they're willing to bury the hatchet and work together for the American people, that is a great sign. You know what I mean? She can say she took him apart. It was great that they took each other apart.
Yeah, I'm okay with Harris. I guess the reason why I still want Warren is that she really understands institutions and how to fix what is broken right now.
Yeah.
And that she would be steadfast in making sure we fix it. And she's not gonna do these like political acrobatics just to be popular or to win an election. I think she's gonna focus on the solutions. And I don't have that feeling about Harris. I think she's like more political. And she doesn't really understand institutions the way Warren does. Warren has studied them. She knows how to redesign them. And so that's why I would still like to see Warren. I think she's the only person I can think of in the entire country who can really fix our institutions. Anyway, so but back to this election. So I mean, what do you have, like a call to action? Is there something that you think people should be doing to mobilize?
I should be doing more. Doing what we're doing right now, like basically being unafraid. If you, first of all, finding out why you can't support Joe Biden, if you can't, like in your mind, it's not enough to be like, okay, fine, I'll go vote, right now. It's not, even though maybe 10 years ago, it would have been, you know what I mean? It would have been like, okay, fine, he's the Democratic nominee. I didn't pick him. But this isn't one of those times. Like, this is, that Noam Chomsky, he didn't make the video, but the people who used his words in that video, I think that was really important to point out that, like, this is a time to, if you can only you can show up against, you can show up for. So if you're going to show up against, at least go on social media, talk about, I've seen a lot of people that are cool that I know, especially people in spiritual circles, it's very important right now that they come forward and make it really clear. A lot of people, when they're silent, you think they support Trump. You just don't know. And that gives this illusion that like a lot more people support him than they do. So what the main thing is to just open your mouth. I mean, wherever you are, if you feel safe doing it. I know it's kind of scary. I just put up yard signs, including like a trans flag and a rainbow flag and a Black Lives Matter sign and everything, and a Biden sign. And I felt frightened to do so. I'll be honest with you. You know what I mean? Like, I feel for people around the country that are afraid to speak up right now because it's the very time we're living in. So first of all, to just confront that fear, to decide whether you can speak up for Biden or you can speak against Trump, and then figure out how to do that. And to be honest, I'm still in the middle of trying to do that. I mean, we're doing this. I do what I can. I talk to people. I do talk to my family about why I'm excited. They were all really bummed out that some of them wanted Bernie, some of them wanted Warren. The family that's Democratic. I shared my excitement with them that I felt like this was going to be a good administration that was going to work more for us and less for the leader. And that made them happy. But I really actually, so I'm asking everyone for their suggestions too about, so in a pandemic, what do I do right now to make sure that people get out there and vote? Because I'm honestly a little bit stuck.
Yeah, I have an idea about this. And let me know what you think of it. But I've been pitching this to some people, especially if you're in a battleground state. Make a list of 100 people that you know through your friends, your family, your neighbors, coworkers, people you know through Facebook, and make sure, contact them in the way that you know would be effective, whether it's messenger or texting or calling or coming by, making sure they know how to vote. They know when the voter registration is, make sure they check their status, make sure they have an understanding of the mail-in ballot situation. They know when early voting starts, and talk to them, kind of hold their hand through it. Because even if you're somebody who is very engaged and very plugged in, it's still an election that is causing a lot of anxiety and confusion. And by design, Trump is trying to just confuse us. Like right now, I'm confused about whether or not I should apply for mail-in ballot in Pennsylvania. And so I think we need to help each other and make sure that we have the support and a sounding board and somebody who would help us get information, right?
Yeah.
So yes, I can help you provide you with resources.
Yes.
For just basic questions about the election, what to do if the election is challenged, what to do about disinformation about Joe Biden. I can help you answer questions like that. But if you could actually make a list of 100 people that you can stay in touch with during this election and make sure they vote, right?
Right.
100 votes in North Carolina could make all the difference in the world, right?
No,
right?
yeah, well, I mean, I was canvassing door to door for Warren, and I was absolutely shocked at the response. See, I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't canvassed. The responses I was getting were that people were like, I just don't know. And then I would just say like 3 things, like, look, you can do this and da da da, and they were just like, yeah, great, thank you.
Yeah.
I needed someone to come and tell me what to do because I am totally overwhelmed, living in a fascist state and not knowing what's next, and I just want to run and hide. And so many people told me that,
Yeah.
And I needed someone to just talk to,
Yeah, and to also talk through the procedure, because the procedure is going to be challenging.
Yeah.
Right. And so, if you could just make a list of 100 people, right? And then if you could find other people to do the same, like you could yourself bring in 1,000 votes in North Carolina if you got 10 people to do this.
Right.
And that could decide the election, Brooke.
Yeah.
1,000 votes in North Carolina. And so we could make a huge difference, but I think it has to be personal, right? You can't just, because people are not answering calls from phones that they don't recognize. I don't know how many people are responding to texts. I'm not responding to texts, because I get 20 of them in a day. I can't respond.
Delete. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, and so I think it has to be very personal. And I think people like you can really make a difference in this election simply by willing to reach out and say, hey, I just want to check in with you about the election.
Yeah.
Right. And giving them
the way
that
it's
support.
going at this point, it's really for us at this point, now that we're done with primary time, it's not really about a choice anymore. It's just, I don't even have to argue about Biden or Trump or anything. I can just say, I want you to vote.
Right.
Because if everyone votes, we win, right?
Yeah.
That's how it is. Those are the numbers.
Exactly. So the more we can get people to take this approach, like you are going to make sure these 100 people vote, you're going to become their friend, their buddy, to make sure they get to vote,
Yes.
right? And we get people to do that. 10 people do that in North Carolina, 10 people in Florida, 10 people in Michigan. Like those add up to thousands of votes.
Sure.
And Trump won by 80,000 votes in 3 states.
I know, right?
You know, so we can make a huge difference because it's going to come down to these slim margins. And I'm in Pennsylvania, you're in North Carolina. If we get our friends to do this, we can make a big impact.
You know what I like about what you're saying too is that it really plugs into something in my kids' school that they teach them, which is sort of the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset. Because what you're saying is really not that, like, it's not that I have to know that I can turn these people. I have to know that I'm going to decide to do something and then absolutely do it. You know, what they do with it is their decision. But if I can make that list, I know I can do what I said I was going to do, but I get overwhelmed by thinking, how can I help? You know, how can I turn the election? No, so what you're pointing out to me, which I love, is to come back to that growth mindset of all I can do is make a plan and stick to it. And my success is doing what I said I would do, coming up with a plan, following through.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, you can just set a goal. So I'm going to reach these people.
Right? I'm going to reach them. Exactly. What they do is what they do.
Yeah. So I'm going to invite you to an organizing call we're doing about this next week, and you meet some other people doing it. And it's a nice community because then, you know, we all need support. I need support. Because this is such a hard election because we can't do normal campaigning. Because normally I would be recruiting people to go to battleground states to door knock.
It's so great to door knock. Yeah, it's so great. And we can't do that now.
We can't do it now.
I miss it, you know?
I know, me too, because you know you're having impact. It's great.
And even without that, it was just wonderful to meet these people. I mean, just it really made me realize how wonderful people are. I mean, I didn't pick them. I was just door knocking, you know, and it was amazing.
Exactly. Anyway, and then also I'm trying to create some merchandising, like signs and t-shirts and stuff that, you know, that we're just creating and designing that we could like hand out to people as we do outreach, right? Give them buttons and, you know, and just get people enthusiastic about voting. Because and I also like if they're stuck on Biden versus Trump, I try to point out to them, well, there are a lot of other people on the ballot. You know, some of them really can make a big difference in your life immediately. And so let's not just get stuck on like the symbols of Trump and Biden and really figure out who can represent us in state government, in city council, in Congress, and just not get so fixated on Biden versus Trump.
Tom Tillis's Senate seat is totally totally up for grabs. Cal Cunningham is a great guy. You know, and
just that alone in North Carolina. Yeah, exactly.
He could win.
I mean so anybody who's saying, oh, I don't know about Joe Biden, like, okay, like Tom Tillis has to go.
Has got to go. Exactly. Unfortunately, you know, I don't think, I don't know. Mo Davis is going for, you know, for Mark Meadows' old seat, and the person he's running against is a nightmare. I mean, it's a literal like militia guy.
Yeah. So my friend Joy Booth in Burnsville in Yancey County is really like doing an amazing job working with Mo Davis to make sure that people in Yancey County come out to vote.
That's my district.
So I'm gonna put you in touch with Joy.
Good.
Because she's and in fact she inspired this whole idea of like reaching out to so hopefully you're gonna meet her on the next call. But I'm gonna invite you to the call. And anybody who's listening who wants to be invited to the call, you know, you can get in touch with me, Annabelle Park. I'm on Facebook. You can also message the page. You can also go to countmeintowin.org. That's our website. If you want to win.org. Yeah. Okay. So we're trying to create a platform where we can train our volunteers, give them support, create a community, and also to like do this thing that I think will have impact.
We've only got 87 days to go. So it's time.
Yeah, I mean, you probably know 100 people on top of your head in North Carolina. Yeah. So anyway, so I'll check in with you about that. I invite you to the call, and feel free to invite anybody else you know in North Carolina or anywhere to the call. I do know some people. it was great talking to you. I'm really glad we touched base because I know you and I were kind of at the exact same place during the primary with Warren.
Yeah.
Like just feeling so frustrated, like, what is going on?
Yeah.
Why isn't this working? Why can't people see what we see? And it was
Yeah.
like I was like obsessively following him, like, oh God, the same way.
Yeah.
But okay, so we work together hopefully, and thank you so much for inspiring me, for everything you're doing. And I mean, seriously, it's people like you who are change this country, and is changing this country.
Well, thank you.
Absolutely.
I needed this inspiration. I mean, I can say all I want to say, but I need to I need to focus, and you're really helping me focus. So that's amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you. Keep doing what you're doing, and I'll touch base with you
Yeah.
offline, and have a really lovely weekend.
You too.
I love your hat.
Thank you.
Okay, see you later, Brooke.
Take care. Bye, everyone.
Okay, bye. All right. Okay, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. I'm just going to keep doing these conversations. If you want to be interviewed or want to be have a conversation with me, just send me a message. I am just interested in talking to voters and checking in with people about the election. And I think it's important to have long conversations where we actually listen to each other, because short conversations tend to be turned into sound bites, and I think we need a kind of back and forth and kind of really explore. So that's why I'm doing these like mega long conversations with people. But thank you for joining, and check out Count Me In to Win. Let me know if you want to join an organizing call. Okay, talk to you soon. Bye.
You've been listening to Conversations About a Way Forward from Count Me In to Win and The Talk on Main Street. To learn more, find us on Facebook at The Talk on Main Street.